It started innocently enough. Harold, my best friend since forever, leaned back on the couch with that lazy grin of his and said, "Dude, why don't you try medical testing? Some of them pay pretty well." I had just finished ranting about my car troubles. My Honda needed $800 in repairs, money I didn't have. Harold was always the guy holding the flashlight while I fumbled under the hood, but I'd never actually fixed anything myself. Now, I was paying the price, quite literally. "Don't you have to, like, be healthy for that?" I muttered, half joking. Harold laughed, a wheezy, smoker's laugh. "Nah, man. They've got tests for everyone, smokers, health nuts, couch potatoes. You name it, they test it." He took another hit off the joint we were sharing, coughing before passing it to me. "Some even pay bonuses if you fit the criteria." Harold grinned. "How do you think I've been affording this great herb lately?" It was true. Harold used to scrape by, always needing help with rent, concert tickets, or even water bills. But in the past couple of months, he'd somehow upgraded his lifestyle. I should have questioned it sooner, but desperation clouds judgment. I exhaled a cloud of smoke and shrugged. What the hell? There are worse ways to make money, right? The next morning, Harold drove me to a nondescript building on the edge of town. It was the kind of place you wouldn't look at twice. Gray, concrete, and utterly forgettable. "This place doesn't exactly scream safe," I muttered as we pulled into the parking structure. "Relax," Harold said, parking his beat-up sedan. "They do all kinds of tests here. You'll find something, trust me. Plus, I get a referral bonus if you get picked." I rolled my eyes but followed him into the building. Inside, the atmosphere was unnervingly pristine. The walls were an unnatural cream color, the floor gleamed like polished glass, and the air smelled faintly of disinfectant. A receptionist sat at a sleek desk, her head set in place as she typed furiously on her keyboard. Harold strode up confidently, flashing her a smile. Before he could say a word, she raised a finger without looking up. "1 second, please." He sighed and waited, glancing at me with an exaggerated "isn't she something?" look. I ignored him, my eyes scanning the room. It felt off, too clean, too sterile, like it was hiding something beneath the surface. When the receptionist finally looked up, her face lit up in recognition. "Oh, hi, Harold." Then her expression darkened. "And no, I'm still not going out with you." Harold raised his hands defensively. "Not here for that. I swear, I'm bringing a referral." He gestured at me. She handed me a clipboard with a small stack of forms. "Fill these out and have a seat." Her tone was professional, but her eyes betrayed something else. Pity. Maybe. Or was it caution? "Can you not hover like that, Harold?" I snapped, clutching the clipboard tighter. His eager gaze made the tedious task of filling out forms even worse. Harold smirked and leaned back in his chair, pulling out his phone. "All right, man. Relax. Just thought I could help." I sighed and turned to the next page, a dense block of tiny, indecipherable text labeled Medical Authorization Agreement. My eyes blurred just trying to read it. "What the hell is this?" I asked, holding the clipboard up. Harold glanced at it and chuckled. "Just legal stuff, man. They're saying they can run tests, draw blood, you know, normal stuff." His nonchalant tone didn't inspire confidence, but I needed the money. I scrawled my signature at the bottom and flipped to the next page. Non-disclosure agreement. An NDA. What am I getting into here? "Relax," Harold said, still glued to his phone. "They're probably just protecting their research or whatever. It's legit, I promise." I signed the NDA, handed the clipboard back to the receptionist, and sat down, my unease growing by the second. Before I could pull out my phone to distract myself, I heard the ding of an elevator. An older woman in a white lab coat stepped out, her polished shoes clicking against the pristine floor. Her smile was professional, but her eyes were sharp, scanning me with unsettling precision. "Good afternoon," she said, extending a hand. "I'm Dr. Brown, head of development here at Dynamic Medical Machines. You must be Richard. I shook her hand awkwardly. Yeah, that's me. I deliver pizza. Dr. Brown laughed a short, almost rehearsed sound. No need to tell us what you do. Everyone here has their reasons for participating. Her words hung in the air, heavy and vaguely ominous. The elevator ride with Dr. Brown was uncomfortably quiet. She stared straight ahead, her badge ready in hand. When we reached the third floor, she swiped her badge across a scanner beneath the buttons, causing the light to flash green. The doors opened to reveal another sterile, blindingly white room. A receptionist sat behind a desk, her face expressionless. She took the clipboard from me and meticulously reviewed the forms. Everything looks in order, she said, her voice devoid of emotion. You can proceed. Dr. Brown nodded and motioned for me to follow her through a heavy door that clicked open with a buzz. This way, Richard. We entered an examination room equipped with a single chair covered in crisp white paper. Dr. Brown gestured toward it. Have a seat. The phlebotomist will begin shortly. As I sat down, the door closed behind me with a soft click, sealing me in. The silence was deafening, the antiseptic smell nauseating. Minutes later, a man in scrubs appeared, carrying a tray of syringes. Just need a few samples, he said flatly, not bothering with pleasantries. He drew 3 vials of blood with mechanical precision before handing me a cup. Urine sample, bathrooms down the hall. I took the cup hesitantly. Drug test. Compatibility, he said, then quickly added, I shouldn't have said that. His words sent a chill down my spine. I walked to the bathroom, my mind racing. The stark white tiles and spotless surfaces felt unnaturally sterile, as if the room had been scrubbed of any trace of humanity. After leaving the sample as instructed, I returned to the examination room, only to find the doorway partially blocked by a large machine on a cart. Oops, sorry about that, said a small, wiry man as he maneuvered the machine out of the way. I sat back in the chair, unease creeping over me. Whatever this machine was, it was unlike anything I'd seen before. Sleek, metallic, and humming faintly. Ready to begin, the man asked, his tone far too cheerful for my liking. What exactly are you testing? I asked, my voice cracking slightly. He didn't answer. Instead, he adjusted the machine, its faint hum growing louder, filling the room with a dissonant vibration. Dr. Zhao fiddled with the machine, attaching wires to what looked like a swimming cap covered in electrodes. He noticed my curious stare and chuckled. Oh, sorry. I'm Dr. Zhao, he said, holding up the cap. This will read the electrical signals from your brain while you answer a few questions. Think of it as a more advanced lie detector. I frowned. Why do you need something like that? Dr. Zhao smiled faintly, but his tone turned clinical. To ensure compatibility. Now, please put this on. I hesitated but sighed and pulled the cap over my head. Grateful my short hair made the process easier. Once the cap was secured, Dr. Zhao flipped a few switches on the machine. A faint hum filled the room, and he positioned the screen so only he could see it. Let's begin, he said, clipboard in hand. State your full name, Richard Pensky. Dr. Zhao's eyes flicked between the screen and his notes. Do you love your parents? I blinked. What? Yeah, sure. And do you find children sexually attractive? What the hell kind of question is that? I snapped, reaching to rip off the cap. Dr. Zhao grabbed my wrist gently, but firmly. I understand your reaction, but we need to screen out undesirable participants. You can imagine why. Reluctantly, I sat back. No, obviously not. Good, he said, nodding. Next question. If a train leaves Los Angeles traveling east at 50 miles per hour and another leaves Williams traveling west at 60 miles per hour, how long will they be on a collision course before the heat death of the universe? I gawked at him. What? That doesn't even make sense. Dr. Zhao glanced at the screen, jotted something down, and smiled. That's all I needed. He swiftly removed the cap and disappeared with the machine, not even bothering to unplug it properly. Dr. Brown entered the room, her previous professional demeanor replaced by an unsettlingly warm smile. "Congratulations, Mr. Pensky," she said. "Your tests indicate that you're an ideal candidate for our newest implant trials." I frowned. "Implant trials? What does that mean?" "It's a minor procedure," Dr. Brown explained. "We'll place a small device just under your cerebellum. In return, you'll receive $4,000 upfront and $1,500 monthly as long as you remain in the trial." My skepticism was warring with the thought of instant cash. "What's the purpose of this device?" Dr. Brown's tone grew serious. "We're developing technology to transfer thoughts between individuals. We call it Project Telepathy." I stared at her, waiting for the punchline. It didn't come. "This sounds insane." She folded her hands. "I assure you, it's completely safe. And you'll be well compensated. We can start as soon as you sign the papers." I hesitated. The promise of $4,000 was tempting. Bills were piling up, and my brother's birthday was coming. "Where do I sign?" Dr. Brown's smile widened. Within an hour, I had signed the documents, visited the bank, and confirmed the check was real. My account balance had never looked so good. Later that evening, I was sitting on my couch, phone in hand, refreshing my banking app just to see the balance again. Harold sprawled beside me, a joint lazily balanced between his fingers. "Told you it was legit," he said. Smirking, I glanced at him. "Yeah, but they're putting something in my head." "You're in this project too, right? What's the deal?" Harold exhaled a plume of smoke and tapped the back of his head, just above the neck. "It's no biggie. The implant's tiny, like the size of a quarter, with a few wires. They just tuck it under the cerebellum." I raised an eyebrow. "When did you start knowing anatomy?" Harold's smirk faltered briefly before he forced it back. "Don't overthink it, man. It's easy money." But his momentary lapse didn't go unnoticed. Something about the way he said it made my unease resurface. As Harold took another puff, I couldn't shake the nagging thought. What had I really signed up for? It was 7 a.m., and the phone woke me from a restless 5-hour sleep. "Hello," I said grudgingly. "Mr. Pensky, this is Dynamic Medical Machines," came a cheerful voice on the other end. "We're calling to schedule your surgery." "That's quick," I said, sitting up. The voice laughed. "Time is money, Richard. We have an opening later today if you're available." I hesitated. "Today? Why the rush?" The answer hit me almost immediately. They found what they needed in me, something rare, and they weren't about to waste time. It felt strange, but also oddly validating. "Sure," I said. "What time?" 6 p.m., they replied. "The procedure is quick. No general anesthesia, just local, a couple of stitches, and you'll be on your way home." Harold gave me a ride to the facility later that evening. "This is either the start of a superhero origin story," I muttered, stepping out of the car, "or a horror movie." Harold grinned. "If you get superpowers, remember who believed in you first." Inside, the receptionist greeted me warmly. "Dr. Brown will see you shortly," she said, pressing a button on her phone. Moments later, Dr. Brown stepped out of an elevator. "No need to wait. Rick, follow me." I followed her to a different elevator than the one we'd used the day before. "This one goes to the basement," she explained, scanning her badge. The panel glowed green, and she pressed a button marked B. "The basement, isn't that a little ominous?" I joked nervously. Dr. Brown smiled warmly. "I know how it sounds. But I assure you, our operating theater is state-of-the-art. You'll find the best medical equipment, recovery rooms, and even better food than most hospitals." The elevator doors opened, revealing a brightly lit, sterile hallway. I felt a pang of unease, but forced myself to trust her. When I came to, blinding white light filled my vision, forcing my eyes shut again. My neck throbbed with pain. "Mr. Pensky, glad to see you're awake." How are you feeling? Dr. Brown's voice was calm but carried a hint of tension. My voice faltered. Instead of my own words, a robotic voice echoed them back from somewhere nearby. What the hell? I croaked. I see the implant is functioning, Dr. Brown said, her tone clinical. Panic welled up in me. Why can't I remember anything? There were complications, she admitted. Some feedback occurred during the procedure, causing temporary memory loss. Our surgeon stabilized you, but minor side effects were expected. I forced my eyes open, blinking against the light until the room came into focus. I was in a sterile hospital room, the kind you'd see in a sci-fi movie. Dr. Brown sat beside me, looking as though she hadn't moved in hours. What time is it? I asked, my voice shaking. Dr. Brown glanced at her watch. It's 11:30 p.m. The procedure took longer than anticipated, but everything is under control now. Under control, I snapped, struggling to sit up. My head throbbed, and the robotic voice repeated my words a split second later. Yes, she replied firmly. The implant is functioning as designed. It's connected to a neural interface that externalizes your thoughts through the speaker. With time, you'll adjust to controlling it. This isn't what I signed up for, I shouted, and the robotic voice echoed the sentiment, making it feel like a mockery. Dr. Brown leaned forward, her expression softening. Richard, I know this is overwhelming, but the initial disorientation will fade. Once you acclimate, you'll experience the true potential of the implant. But as I sat there, the robotic echo of my thoughts filling the sterile room, a chilling realization settled over me. I had become their experiment, and there was no turning back. Dr. Brown laughed lightly, her voice carrying an unsettling mix of professionalism and warmth. I see you're still a bit disoriented. Don't worry, that's normal. And for the record, it's 7:15 a.m. I glanced around the room, frantically searching for my phone. Harold was probably still waiting for me, pacing back and forth in the lobby. Harold's been informed of your condition, Dr. Brown said, handing me my phone from her pocket. He sends his regards. I unlocked the screen to find a text from Harold. Get some rest, man. See you when you're out. How long until I can leave? I asked, still groggy and increasingly uneasy. Dr. Brown flipped through the clipboard at the end of my bed. Toxicology looks fine, but we'd like to keep you overnight for observation. As if mocking me, the speaker in the corner of the room chirped in my robotic echo. This is annoying. I turned to the machine, which resembled the cart-mounted setups doctors use for mobile monitors. The speaker, with its droning synthetic voice, grated on my nerves. Can we turn that damn thing off? I snapped. Of course, Dr. Brown replied, walking over and pressing a button. The room fell into blissful silence. I have some other matters to attend to, she said. The nurses are stationed just outside your room, and dinner will be served at 9. Get some rest. With that, she left, the door clicking softly shut behind her. Alone, I noticed the itching at the back of my neck again. My fingers brushed against the spot, sending a sharp flare of pain through me. Wincing, I pulled my hand away. I tried to focus on something else, but couldn't shake a troubling thought. Why had the machine been active when I woke up? It was as though it had been listening even while I was unconscious. The nurses, stoic and silent, avoided answering my questions about the implant or the machine. Either they didn't know or weren't allowed to tell me. Unable to sleep, I turned to the internet, searching for information on dynamic medical machines. Their website was polished and vague, full of corporate jargon about pioneering the future of medical technology. It provided little actual information. Digging deeper, I found a page about the company's leadership. Dr. Isabel Brown's photo stood out, a stern woman with a practiced, warm smile. Clicking through, I discovered she was well known in her field, with patents and accolades aplenty. But on the third page of Google results, I found something curious, a 1979 article from an archived copy of Fortean Times. The focus wasn't Dr. Isabel Brown, but her father, Dr. Patrick Brown, a once prominent scientist obsessed with proving the existence of psychics. The article described a testing center he had established to uncover individuals with paranormal abilities, people who could read minds, see the future, or move objects without touching them. The same testing center was still operational today, though Dr. Patrick Brown's name was conspicuously absent from its website. Before I knew it, the first rays of sunlight crept into the room. A soft knock sounded at the door. "How are you feeling this morning, Mr. Pensky?" Dr. Brown's voice was chipper as she stepped into the room. "Couldn't sleep much," I admitted. She nodded knowingly. "That's to be expected. You did wake up at 6 p.m. yesterday, after all. Any soreness or itching?" "A little," I replied. "The nurses gave me something for it. Helped a lot." "I'm glad to hear it," she said, her tone shifting to business. "Are you ready for some testing of the implant?" She didn't wait for a response, holding up a clipboard and moving to the cart. For the first time, I noticed the screen attached to the machine, the one supposedly reading my thoughts. Dr. Brown clicked a few unrecognizable icons on the outdated-looking interface. "You designed this yourself?" I asked, more out of unease than curiosity. She scoffed. "Of course. If anyone knows how to handle this machine, it's me." The screen flickered to life, showing a series of words and phrases. My stomach sank as I realized they were my thoughts, unedited, raw, and far too revealing. The machine's interface flickered to life. It resembled an outdated audio editing program, its interface clunky and oddly sinister. Dr. Brown adjusted a few settings. "We'll start with a simple word association test. I'll say a word, and you just need to think of a response. No need to speak." "Sounds good," I replied hesitantly. She clicked a button, and the machine hummed louder. "Father," she said, watching me closely. The speaker on the cart crackled. "Absent." The computerized voice sent shivers down my spine. It wasn't just repeating what I was consciously thinking, it was sifting through something deeper. Dr. Brown continued, "Job." The speaker responded before I could even process the word. "Pointless." I flinched. I hadn't consciously thought that, had I? My mind spiraled, questioning whether the machine was extracting words I wasn't aware of or implanting them. Circles. Thoughts about circles. Circular thoughts. A bright light flashed in my eyes, jolting me back to the present. Dr. Brown was leaning over me, her pen light blinding me. "Good, you're back with us," she said. "What happened?" I mumbled, disoriented. "You fainted," she said matter-of-factly. "It happens sometimes during testing." I nodded, though her explanation didn't sit well. "Considering the implant's complications, I'm recommending we keep you here a bit longer," she continued. "I'd really like to go home," I said, trying to sound firm. "I think I'll recover better there." Dr. Brown's expression hardened. "I'm sorry, Richard. Under the medical contract you signed, we're enforcing a mandatory quarantine for your safety and ours." Quarantine. My stomach sank. She was holding me against my will. Once Dr. Brown left, I grabbed my phone, desperate to call anyone. But there was no Wi-Fi, and my signal was dead. I was completely cut off from the outside world. My unease deepened as the nurses remained tight-lipped, their politeness masking an unsettling detachment. The implant's side effects grew worse. The pain in my neck ebbed and flowed, accompanied by bouts of vertigo and strange, looping thoughts. Each time it happened, I blacked out briefly, only to wake with the TV blaring on Fox Business. Why was I losing time, and why the hell was I tuning into financial news? "Hey," a voice called from the doorway. Dr. Zhao entered, holding a tiny flashlight. "I'm here to check on your implant site. Is now a good time?" "Sure," I muttered, barely looking up. He stepped closer, the faint smell of antiseptic following him. As he examined my neck, I felt his breath warm against my skin. "Everything looks good," he said. "The incision is healing nicely. Let me fire up the receiver to check the signal." He turned to the cart and powered on the machine. "My name's Rick," I said, correcting him. Dr. Zhao froze for a moment, his expression unreadable. Then, his face softened into a smile. Of course, my apologies, Rick. The hum of the machine resumed. Dr. Zhao began asking strange, intrusive questions. Are you sexually attracted to children? What? I exclaimed, horrified. Before I could say anything more, the speaker on the cart blurted out, Of course not, you slant-eyed. The room fell silent. Dr. Zhao didn't react, his composure unsettling. No worries, he said, raising his voice slightly as if addressing unseen observers. It's the implant. These responses are involuntary. My mind reeled. I hadn't thought that. I couldn't have thought that. When I regained awareness, Dr. Zhao was gone, and the TV was blaring again. I checked my phone instinctively. No Wi-Fi, no signal, no connection. The implant was digging into places in my mind I didn't know existed, broadcasting thoughts or fabricating them. I stared at the machine. It still hummed, now a sinister presence in the room. What had I signed up for? The voice recorder was still in my hand, my thumb hovering over the playback button. I barely noticed as my breathing quickened. The name Daniel Warburton had rung a faint bell earlier, but now it hit me like a freight train. The man on the TV, the visionary investor who had died from cancer at 83, was the same voice trapped in the computerized speaker of this cursed machine. My mind raced. Dr. Brown and her team weren't just experimenting with implants, they were transferring consciousness, stripping people of their autonomy. Pinsky, as some kind of host body for Warburton. The recording became my lifeline, a thread tying together the chaos around me. I pressed play again. Dr. Brown's voice was calm, clinical. Mr. Warburton, your situation is not ideal, but we're making progress. The feedback loop is stabilizing, and soon you'll regain control. Warburton's digitized voice rose in frustration. You said that for days. Days. Meanwhile, I'm stuck in this body, unable to control it, unable to access any memories. How am I supposed to run my business empire from here? I understand your frustration. No, you don't, Warburton barked. You're not the one trapped in someone else's body. I felt a chill run down my spine. They had taken more than just my freedom. They'd stolen me. As the recording continued, Dr. Brown revealed the process. The implant allows for a full neural overwrite, she explained. It was designed to seamlessly transition consciousness from one individual to another. Your case is unique, because Richard's brain chemistry resists the overwrite. It's unprecedented, Warburton hissed. So, I'm your guinea pig. No, you're a pioneer, Dr. Brown replied evenly. This technology could save millions of lives. Imagine terminal patients being granted a second chance in a healthy body. A second chance, Warburton sneered. What about his chance? There was a pause. The silence was deafening. Before I could process the conversation, the TV flashed again, another breaking news alert. Further updates on the passing of Daniel Warburton, the anchor said. Insiders report that Warburton's estate has been transferred to a mysterious trust, with investments continuing in biomedical research. No heirs have been named. The screen showed a photo of Warburton and his prime confidant, commanding. The juxtaposition between the man on the screen and the computerized voice from the machine was unbearable. I paused the recording, my mind spinning. This wasn't just about me anymore. Warburton's wealth and influence meant this operation was bigger than I'd realized. They weren't going to let me leave not alive, anyway. The implant wasn't just a device, it was a trap. I needed a plan. The voice recorder was proof, but I couldn't use it here. The room was likely monitored. Every interaction with Dr. Brown or the nurses felt like a performance for unseen eyes. My phone's battery was draining fast. If I didn't act soon, I'd lose my only leverage. Harold Dorrather, the thing pretending to be Harold, walked out of the room. I watched as the door shut behind him, the false smile lingering in my mind. For a moment, the only sound in the room was the faint hum of the fluorescent lights overhead. I turned my attention to the machine in the corner. The key to everything lay within its cold, metallic frame. I knew the risks. Turning on the machine might trigger another blackout, giving Daniel, or whatever fragmented part of him existed, the chance to take control. But it was also my only shot at communicating directly with him. If I could just convince him that we were both trapped, that we both needed each other to escape, maybe, just maybe, I could turn this nightmare to my advantage. I hesitated for a moment, my hand hovering over the machine's power button. My heart pounded in my chest, each beat louder than the last. "Here goes nothing," I muttered under my breath, pressing the button. The machine whirred to life, its screen flickering as it powered up. A moment later, the speaker crackled, and the computerized voice that belonged to Daniel Warburton filled the room. "Back so soon?" Daniel's voice was laced with irritation. "What now? More tests, more lies from your doctor friends." "It's me," I said quickly, before he could spiral into another tirade. "Richard." There was a pause. "Richard." Daniel sounded confused. "How are you talking to me?" "The machine shouldn't allow." I turned it on. I interrupted. "Listen, we don't have much time. I need your help. And you need mine." Daniel's voice was skeptical. "Why would I help you? You're the one holding me back from reclaiming my life." "You're wrong," I shot back. "I'm just as much a victim as you are. They're experimenting on both of us. If we work together, we might have a chance to escape." Daniel was silent for a moment, the static of the machine filling the void. "And why should I trust you?" he finally asked. "Because without me, you're stuck," I said, leaning forward. "You said it yourself, you can't remember anything during the blackouts. Whatever they did to us, it's not working the way they planned. You can't take over my body, and I can't get out of here without your resources. We need each other." Daniel's voice softened slightly. "You make a compelling argument, Richard. But even if I wanted to help, what could I possibly do? I'm nothing more than a voice in the machine." "You're Daniel Warburton," I said firmly, "the man who built an empire from nothing. If anyone can find a way to leverage this situation, it's you. But first, you need to trust me." Another pause. "Fine," Daniel said reluctantly. "I'll listen, but if you try to double-cross me, I won't." I promised. "We don't have time for games. Now, here's what we need to do." The machine's hum filled the room, blending with the mechanical voice of Daniel Warburton, the man who had paid an obscene amount to steal my life. I had initiated this confrontation, but now that it was happening, every fiber of my being screamed retreat. "Who is this?" Daniel's voice came through, cold and calculating. "My name is Richard Pensky," I said firmly, masking my nerves. "Dr. Brown must have mentioned me. I'm the one whose body you're borrowing." A pause. Then, a chuckle, calm but tinged with condescension. "Ah, the meat. What can I do for you?" The casual dismissal stung, but I didn't let it show. I had one shot to convince him that his survival and mine depended on listening to me. "Mr. Warburton, I'm not going to sugarcoat this. The implant is malfunctioning. You've noticed it, haven't you? The blackouts, the gaps in memory." Daniel's tone sharpened. "What's your point?" I leaned closer to the machine. "If the implant fails completely, it won't just affect me, it could destroy you. Your consciousness, your empire, everything, gone." The machine crackled with static as Daniel processed this. Then, he laughed again, but there was unease beneath it. "You think you can scare me into helping you? Cute." I took a deep breath and doubled down. "This isn't a scare tactic, Daniel. Think about it. If the implant worked perfectly, you wouldn't even be talking to me. But here we are, both stuck in this mess. The only way out is together." The silence that followed felt endless. Then, finally, "You have some nerve, Richard. But I'll admit you make a compelling argument." Relief washed over me, but I didn't have time to dwell on it. "Good. Here's the plan. I have a phone, but they've blocked all outgoing calls. I need your resources, your people, to make contact." "Blocked calls? That's child's play," Daniel scoffed. Do you have access to the network terminal? I don't even know what that is, I admitted, but I have a feeling Dr. Brown does. If we can get her to slip up, I might be able to access it. Fine, Daniel said grudgingly, but don't think this makes us partners. The second I regained control, you're nothing more than a bad memory, I ignored the threat. Deal. Hours later, I was awakened by a knock at the door. The sight of Harold or the thing pretending to be Harold sent a chill down my spine. He tossed a pair of jeans onto the bed and leaned in close, his voice dropping the pretense of friendliness. You're an idiot, Richard, he sneered, his tone cold and robotic. I forced myself to stay calm. Nice to see you too, Harold. Or should I call you something else? His smile was unsettling, a mockery of human expression. Call me whatever you like. It won't matter soon. Is that a threat? I asked, keeping my tone light but readying myself for a fight. Not from me, he said, stepping back. But if you keep poking around, you'll find out exactly what Dr. Brown and her team have planned for you. And trust me, you won't like it. As Harold left, I felt the weight of the situation pressing down on me. Whatever they had planned, it was happening soon. And now, more than ever, I needed Daniel's cooperation to escape. I turned back to the machine, its screen still glowing faintly in the dark. You still there, Daniel? His voice crackled through the speaker. I'm always here, Richard. Now let's get to work. I paused, half dressed in the jeans Harold had tossed onto the bed, and looked at him. Excuse me, I asked, my voice tinged with disbelief. Why are you helping me? You could have easily handed me over, or worse, stayed out of it entirely. Harold leaned back, his expression unreadable. There was a coldness to his demeanor that I hadn't noticed before, but a flicker of something else, something almost human was there. I'm helping you because I heard the anger in your voice, he said. My mother took your best friend away from you, and the implant, it's not something I want to think about, but here we are. I pulled on the jeans and glanced at him. His casual attitude wasn't fooling me, but it was hard to ignore the raw truth in his words. You know what the implant does? He asked, his voice quieter now. I nodded slowly, realizing that his question wasn't just a casual observation. It's a copy of the consciousness, or at least a fragment of it. It's like a prison. Whoever's in the body, well, they're still there, fighting, even if no one can see or hear them. Harold shifted uncomfortably, his expression betraying the conflict inside him. Exactly. If you're trying to make me feel sympathetic, it's not working. I'm still stuck in my own nightmare. I interrupted him before he could spiral into self-pity. That's not the point. I'm trying to tell you that I know what your Harold thought of you. He considered you his friend. You were a good friend to him. He never deserved this. And you, neither. He fell silent. Don't worry about calling Daniel's lawyers, I added, standing fully dressed now. I've already called them. He looked at me, wide-eyed, a mixture of surprise and disbelief crossing his face. What? You? I've already contacted them, I said confidently. They should be here any minute. True to my word, about 30 minutes later, two lawyers arrived, accompanied by a pair of uniformed officers. They quickly presented an injunction demanding my release. Dr. Zhao didn't make a fuss when confronted with the paperwork without Dr. Brown in the building. The hospital had no defense against the force of legal threats. It felt strange, but liberating, to finally be out of the facility. I was now in a real hospital. The sterile but welcoming atmosphere, a stark contrast to the cold, dark labs I had been trapped in. The nurses here were kind, answering my questions with care. But the doctors still couldn't make heads or tails of the implant in my neck. They listened to the recordings I had from the machine, the one where Daniel's voice still echoed, trapped in the speaker. They didn't fully believe me, but the court documents and statements from former employees at the Dynamic Medical Machines building gave enough weight to convince them that something was terribly wrong. The blackouts persisted, though. They weren't getting worse, but they weren't getting better either. And Daniel, he was still with me, still inside this machine, existing in some fragmented form. Will, Harold's brother, had left for China. I had no clue what was happening in his world, but Daniel had assured me, through the machine, that Will's will was ironclad, and Daniel would continue his work, unchallenged, until I figured out how to break free. Dr. Brown's son had visited the hospital once or twice, though I couldn't figure out his exact motivations. I didn't blame him for what had happened to his mother or for what she had done to Harold, even if it had put me in this mess. But I couldn't shake the feeling that Harold's presence, even in his altered form, might have been the only thing keeping me sane in all of this. It wasn't all bad news, though. Emma had volunteered to have the implant removed, but the doctors had advised against it. The risk of it killing him was too great, and seeing the X-ray confirmed my worst fears. But Emma was still alive, and that was something. Now, as I lay in the hospital bed, everything seemed blurry. Too much had happened, too quickly. Tomorrow, I was supposed to undergo some kind of surgery. I didn't know whether it was the same procedure that might have killed Emma, but the uncertainty hung heavily in the air. The specialists would do what they could. They had no implants in their heads, and for that, I trusted them more than anyone else right now. But there was still the lingering question of what would happen if the implant failed again, if it couldn't be repaired. Would I be able to reclaim my life, or would I be trapped forever? I didn't have answers, but at least I had hope. And, for the first time in a long while, I felt like I was finally fighting back.